tape of the Joe Verde training program, How to Close More Sales. This program was designed by Joe to help you close more sales, overcome your customers' objections, stay off price on the lot, and hold gross. There is also homework and a quick quiz for you to fill out at the completion of each tape in this series. And now, let's begin. Here's Joe.
Are you ready again? Last couple tapes, we've gone over what I've said is the most important techniques that you need to learn. We talked about those 5 questions, the 5 methods to handle objections. In fact, let's run through those questions real quick. Now, don't turn in your workbook to them. What's the most important question? What's that question that gets people to nod their head yes? What's that called? Heard somebody say a tie down or a tag on. We want as many of those minor commitments as we can. Bob, that sure is comfortable, isn't it? That'll sure handle those windy mountain roads, won't it? Every time we get them to nod yes, we add value to this. So we want as many minor commitments as we can. The second one, what was it called? Got the yes questions, and then we control conversations with what kind of questions? The either-or questions. Now, we use them to control the conversation. We offer people a choice of responses. We also, there's 2 primary purposes of the either-or. One, to investigate, so that we control the investigation process. Bob, who's the car for, you or Betty? How are you going to use it, business or pleasure? You guys looking for cars or trucks, 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, standard cab or extra cab? Now, the easy way to investigate is each response leads you to the next question. Y'all looking for cars or trucks? Cars. Now, what kind of cars do you have? You have 2 doors, you have 4 doors, you have station wagons, maybe you have minivans you're going to call a car. So, Bob, when you say cars, you're looking for 2 doors, 4 doors, station wagons, or possibly a minivan? Well, probably a 2-door. You only got 2 kinds of 2 doors, basic transportation or something a little nicer. Every question will lead you to the next one, something a little nicer. Run out of questions there, take a different track. You're going to use it for business or pleasure? I'm going to use it for business. There's only 2 ways to use it for business. Do you ride by yourself or carry people with you? Well, I carry people with me. There are only 2 kinds of people, friends or clients. So every question leads you to an opportunity to ask another question. Again, you want this to be conversational questioning. You want to build some rapport at the same time you're investigating. Remember, you want to match the 2 up. The involvement question is to force what kind of ownership on people? Forces them to take mental ownership. Now, I'm not going to buy this in the finance office, sign my name, write you a check until I've taken mental ownership up here. And that's one of the reasons we're going to talk about how to get a commitment before you go inside and start negotiating. Some of you guys use that loosey-goosey commitment question. Gosh, Bob, do you like it? Yeah, well, you want to go inside and see what we can do? Do you have a commitment? You have no commitment. The customer's not taking mental ownership. You're going to go in there and negotiate without the customer agreeing to purchase. That's not good luck, that's bad luck. So we want to talk about some ways you can get those commitments. In fact, when I go inside, I don't want just a commitment to own. I want 10 commitments to own. I don't want them thinking about buying. I want them to mentally see themselves owning this car. I want them to see themselves already having made the decision, and all that's left is the paperwork. And we'll talk to you about how to do that. The sharp angle question is to turn their questions into a commitment. And again, you don't do it with every question they ask, but you can certainly do it with more questions. Do you guys have these in a 5-speed? Were you looking specifically for a 5-speed? The assumptive statements, questions, and closes. You want to fill your presentation with positive statements. You guys are going to love this. Boy, this thing's going to get you great gas mileage. This truck's going to handle all your business needs. You want to fill it with positive statements. Now, you add value to that statement when you throw in a question. Instead of just saying, you're going to love showing this off to all your friends. Throw in a question. Won't this be fun showing it off to all your friends? And now you get that positive response from them. You've built more value. Yeah, it will be fun showing it off. And you're going to have a great time doing it too, aren't you? Yeah, I am. And they're going to hate you for getting a new car, aren't they? Yeah, they are. And you're going to love it, aren't you? Yes, I am. So we can take that positive statement, add a question. We're also going to lead into every close with an assumptive question or an assumptive statement. If this page was filled with our close, the close that we're going to use, whether it's a summary close, a Ben Franklin close, doesn't matter what closing technique we're going to use, the last line of our close is always a positive statement. Well, it sounds like we found the perfect car. How do you want it registered in your name or her name? Or let's go in and wrap this up so you guys can get out here and start enjoying it. Your name or her name. The assumptive statement will always come before the closing question, 95, 99% of the time. We also talked on the last tape about the methods to handle the objections that you get. When you close, you're going to get objections. When you greet a customer on the lot, you get an objection. Yesterday we talked about objections, and that first that first objection you get when you say, how can I help you? How can I help you, folks? We're just looking. Is that a reflex or sincere objection? It's a reflex objection. How do you handle reflex objections? You bypass them quickly with a statement. Great. Who's the lucky one who gets a car, you or somebody else? So we bypass reflex objections. There's also 3 other things that are real important that we learn to bypass on every sale with every customer. If they're out on the lot and they bring up price way out front, price comes up out here, we want to bypass it. We don't want to talk about price there. Remember that old saying, you sell on your feet, you talk price on your seat. It's not time to talk about price on the lot, other than to answer their price question. How much is it? Tell them, get away from it. How much is it? $17,300. By the way, who's the lucky one? Who gets a car, you or somebody else? Next thing we want to learn to do is to clarify the objection to make sure that we completely understand it. We don't want to start overcoming the wrong objection, so we want to clarify the objection to make sure we understand it. When we get an objection like, boy, it's a lot of money, what can we do with that objection? What's the other technique we learned that'll help us make that objection easier to handle? Boy, it's a lot of money. What can we do with that? We can rephrase it. We can change it. It's a lot of money. Sounds to me like you're concerned about your budget. Oh, yeah, I am. Now we close. So, Bob, if we fit it in your budget and you felt comfortable with everything and it was okay, would there be any other reason you wouldn't want to take it? Gosh, no. If it fit the budget, of course I'd take it. Get a commitment. Great. Come on inside. We'll take care of the paperwork. Your name or her name. These techniques all start working together, and as you read through the scripts in your workbook, some of the time I've left out the technique, and most of the time I put it in. The reasons I left it out is I want you to figure out what happened there. Were we clarifying? Were we rephrasing? Were we isolating? Were we closing? Were we confirming? You write out the step in each one of those scripts that doesn't have it spelled out. So we want to rephrase things. We always want to isolate objections. What's the key word to isolating? Other than. And then we want to close on the objection. Closing on objections is really just closing, but you're closing on a specific objection. I want an objection so that I can close on it. If I ask for the order and they say no, I want a reason. I want a specific reason. We'll talk about how to find the real objection. We're going to talk about how to close here, the 10 best closes on the lot. You will get objections half the time, most of the time. When you get that objection, we have to learn what to do with it. So we'll talk about how to find the real objection when they give it to us. And then in the next tape, we'll talk about how to close on the objection. So we've got 10 ways to ask for the order here on page 57. Now, before you go inside, you have to have a commitment to own. And, you know, unless it's just against dealership policy to get a commitment from the customer, I'd suggest you get it. I don't know of any managers who would mind if you got a customer to say, yes, we'd like to have it. Even in the most non-confrontational selling environment around, I can't imagine anybody wanting to work a deal with it that wouldn't mind if you had a commitment. At the bottom of the page, on page 57, where it says question, if you don't have a commitment when you go in here, on that line, write the only closing tool you'll have. I believe it's price. Which way do you have to go with price? I forgot. Up or down? Down. Doesn't sound like a very good way to go. Now, we're going to go through these closes, and we'll go through them fairly quickly. What I need you to do after class is to go back and reread the scripts. I want you to read the scripts, want you to understand them, want you to change the scripts to make them work for you, and realize that on page 58, now I have several scripts written out. That's not the only way you can use this close. You need to write out some other ways to use the close. And at the last tape, we've got a lot of homework for you guys to do. We're going to do the things that'll help you learn this quicker and learn it faster. Page 58, number 1, the assumptive close. Now, we've talked about that and talked about it. It's the best close, it's the easiest one to use, and it's the one that you want to use most often. Again, an assumptive close is an assumptive statement with a closing question. Now, the either-or question will be there probably 95% of the time. The assumptive statement will be there probably 95% of the time. There are some times when you would close without an assumptive statement and without an either-or question, and we'll talk about a couple of those, but almost all the time, assumptive statement, closing question. Now, when you close, you also have to learn to close with confidence. Even if you think the customer may not say yes, you have to close assuming they'll say yes. It's got to come across in your tone, your inflection, your body language. You've got to have enthusiasm. You know, if we look at the things that make up a good salesperson, a good closer, it would be enthusiasm, right up there at the top. The sales made, I heard a speaker one time say, the sales made when you take your enthusiasm and give it to your customer. No enthusiasm, no sale most of the time. So when you close, stick out your hand. What have people been taught to do when you stick out your hand? Shake hands. So use that conditioning that just like thank you gets you welcome, congratulations gets you thank you, stick out your hand gets you another hand. When I close, I stick out my hand and say congratulations, sounds like we found a perfect car. How do you want it registered? It just adds that extra incentive for them to go ahead and take it. Now, at the very bottom of the page, this assumptive close, we've talked about it again and again. At the bottom of the page, it says how to tie an assumptive close in with an action close. How to tie an assumptive statement in with an action close. Now, don't try to read the workbook while I'm doing this. Just listen. An action close is something you do or that they do that equals buying. An action close. Bob, sounds like we found a perfect car. Go ahead and park it in the sold line. Now, if he parks it in the sold line, if he follows that action, did he agree to buy the car? Yeah, we've got an agreement. Betty, do me a favor and grab the pink slip out of the glove box. If she grabs the pink slip out of the glove box to the trade, did she not do that to help you do the paperwork and finalize the sale? So that's called an action close. Use assumptive statements too. Betty, sounds like found a perfect car. Go ahead and grab the pink slip and the registration out of the glove box. And Bob, do me a favor, read off the miles there to me. You got both people doing things that equal, hey, we bought the car. And we want as many commitments as we can. Page 59, your summary close. And we talked about this on one of the other tapes. A summary close is where you lead up to a closing question. You've got the top of the page, you got short summary closes, and then you have longer summary closes. Remember, our assumptive statement, our either or question. A summary close is where you go back and summarize a few things. Let's say you got back off the demonstration drive. Betty's pretty excited. She says, well, Bob, I kind of like this. What do you think? And he said, well, you know, and you can see a little indecision there. Use a summary close. So, well, it's, you know, it sounds like this is pretty close to what you guys are looking for. Now, this has the equipment you want, doesn't it? Yeah. And Betty, you said blue was your favorite color, wasn't it? Yeah. And I know you guys especially wanted that CD player, didn't you? Yeah. And I know you hadn't planned on that sunroof, but that's going to be kind of nice too, isn't it? And they say, yeah. Bob and Betty, it sounds to me like we found a perfect car. Betty, we're going to let Bob be on the title, or you just want it in your name? Summary close, assumptive statement, either or question. Summarize, assume, close. And I hope you understand there's a process with this every time. Now, it's a short summary close. A longer summary close would just have more questions. Let's say that you got out of the car. Let's say Bob was buying a car for his daughter this time. She's going to use it going back and forth to school. Safety is one of his main concerns. Economy and dependability are important to him. You get back off the demonstration drive. Daughter is all excited about this thing. Bob's over here. Well, I just don't know. You need to maybe summarize a little bit more. Now, Bob, I believe Cindy was getting a car, and it's kind of a graduation present, isn't it? Yeah. And you said she worked pretty hard in school, and she earned this, didn't she? Yeah. And Cindy, this has got everything you want, doesn't it? And she says, yeah. And Bob, here's one of the things I don't know if I showed you before. And you tell him something else, get another minor commitment. That's pretty nice to know, too, isn't it? And he says, yeah. Bob, you know, isn't it nice to be able to reward our kids when they do such a nice job in school? Yeah. You know, Bob, sounds to me like we found a perfect car for Cindy. Were you going to put her on the title or just keep it in your name? Back to an assumptive statement, either or question. Short summary close, longer summary close. You might need to do this many little minor commitments before you ask your closing question. You have to determine when it's time or when it's almost time to ask for the order, and then you have to lead them into a position to ask these closing questions. You'll just hardly ever be in the middle of a presentation saying, Bob, car's got disc brakes, stop you quicker. Sounds like found a perfect car. Do you want to buy it? It didn't work there. You have to lead to a close. You don't just pull a close out of the air 99% of the time. Now and then, yeah, you do because it just happens to be the right time. But almost always you'll need to lead into it. Short summary close, most of the time you'll want to ask a couple quick questions, unless you're in the back seat, like we were talking to one of the other tapes, you're in the back seat, Bob and Betty say, boy, we love the car. Well, then close. You don't need to summarize. You just go straight to an assumptive close. Bob, sounds like we found a perfect car. Betty, we're going to let him be on the title. You're going to register it in just your name. So close when it's time. You use this a lot. You use this quite a bit, and a lot of times you'll just use an assumptive statement. Page 60 is another type of close. A similar situation close. You've got somebody that's on the lot. They're sort of hesitating. You know they like the car. They're trying to decide what to do. Let's say that you've got somebody out there. Guy's looking at a pickup truck for his business. He's a little undecided. He's a little hesitant because it's a lot of money, and he's afraid he's going to have to take too much money out of his business, but he knows he needs a truck. Tell him a story. Relate a similar experience somebody else had with a situation a lot like this, and you've got a lot of those if you just talk to your customers. And a lot of you use this maybe even more than you realize. But storytelling, telling them about the similar situation is one of the most effective closes. Bob's looking for this pickup truck for his company. He's a little hesitant about spending money, and he says, Joe, you know, boy, I like this truck, but that's just a lot of money. I say, Bob, I know it is, and that's exactly why you should get it. You know, what do you mean that's exactly why I should get it? Well, Bob, you know, this kind of reminds me, a couple months ago I had another guy in here, owned a small company like you do, needed a pickup truck for his business, almost the exact same thing, a little bit different business, but he was having this same kind of decision problem that you're having, whether to spend a little extra money, get something really nice, or buy something that he could just squeak by and afford. And what he decided to do was go ahead and get the nicer truck. He realized that his customers make a decision on using his company partly on what they see when he pulls up in their driveway. He decided not only to get the nicer truck, he had us put some extra special paint on it and put a sign on the side of the door. I talked to him just a few days ago, and he said business has never been so good. He said he's convinced he picked up an account when he pulled up because he saw the people. He saw this other guy drive away in an old pickup truck, looked like heck, and he pulled up in that new one. He could just see the difference. He said he made more on that one sale than it takes to almost pay for the truck. Let's go ahead and get you out of here. Let's get you in the truck. Do you want to put a sign on it or just take it as is? And close. Give them some logical reasons to go ahead and buy. You know, people make buying decisions based on logic and emotion. We use emotion to get people excited. Sometimes I'm excited, but I'm having second thoughts. When I'm having second thoughts, sometimes all we need to do is put some logic in the loop. Well, Bob, here's what another guy did. Whoa, that makes sense to me. You know how sometimes you bought something and you shouldn't have bought it, and then later you justified it? I bought a car one time I couldn't afford. I wasn't in that bracket, and I was driving the car home, and we spent a lot more than we meant to spend. 2 blocks from the dealership as we're driving away, you know, we pulled up to one of those mirrored buildings downtown at the stoplight, looked over and I said, boy, you know, it sure looked good in this. Whoa, you know, this will make a good car for business, won't it? Yeah. And, you know, it's really nice. We got that 4-door in case we ever carry anybody. Yeah. By the time we'd gone 6 blocks, we had filled in the logic and convinced ourselves that this was a good thing to do. People want to buy the car. They get emotionally excited about it. Sometimes it's just that little bit of logic that tips the edge and makes the sale. And that's what a similar situation close is. Page 61, there's another thing that you can use to your benefit. Nobody wants to miss out. Nobody wants to lose. And this is called the don't miss out or fear of loss close. Don't miss out or fear of loss on page 61. We know that they came to buy. 78% are going to buy. 85% of those 78 came to buy. But we still have to create the urgency in buying. Even though they want it, they're going to procrastinate if they can, because putting it off is much easier than doing it for almost everybody. Big decision, a lot of money, uncomfortable. Last time wasn't any fun. Don't expect it to be any different this time. I worked with a fellow when I first started selling cars, and I didn't realize what this guy did. He was just smooth with everything he did. And I was standing out on the lot one day, and it was when we had that first gas crunch, and he was standing out there, and people were pulling up in big cars. And Charlie had introduced himself and all that, and he'd visit there a little bit, and one of his investigative questions, were you going to keep that little car you pulled up in, or were you going to trade it? And they said, no, we're going to trade it. And he made this statement, boy, we've been getting a lot of those in on trade lately. Now, he never said anything else about it, but just simply by making the statement, boy, we've been getting a lot of those in on trade, when he gets ready to negotiate, and his manager doesn't give him as much money as they'd like to have, doesn't that give him a closing tool? When he's inside trying to negotiate, and they want $500 more than their car's worth, he can turn around and use what he said on the lot now as a sense of urgency close or fear of loss. Gosh, folks, I know this isn't exactly what you want, but I don't know if I've mentioned it, but we've been getting a ton of these big cars in on trade. And I'm afraid that if we wait, you know, your car normally drops about $100 a month anyway. With this gas problem we're having, this thing may drop another $500 or $1,000 quicker than we can blink. Be a shame to miss out on that. And he'd close the sale. Now, a couple months later, when the gas thing was over, all these people trying to trade these big cars or these little cars back in for a big one. And he'd say the same thing. It didn't matter whether they pulled up in a little one or a big one or a Camaro or a Mustang. It didn't matter what car they pulled up in. He always said, boy, we've been getting a lot of those in on trade lately. And that sets up the fear of loss or don't miss out. A couple of things there in the middle of the page. This statement that first thing that says this statement, these have been selling like hotcakes ever since they came out. What does that mean later? Boy, these things sell like hotcakes. When you're trying to close, don't you create a sense of urgency by saying, you know, we've only got 2 of these. I don't know how long they're going to last. I don't know if I mentioned it, but these things sell quicker than we can get them. Remember, people don't want to miss out. They'll procrastinate, but they don't want to miss out. We have to order cars tomorrow morning. We'll use that later as an incentive. You know, my manager has got to order cars tomorrow morning. If you guys said you wanted to trade your car, it'll never be worth more than it is today, especially when he's under the pressure to get rid of some of these so he can fill the slots. The rebate's been on for 3 weeks, implies that the rebate may be over soon. We've been getting a lot of cars like yours in lately. Just some of the things that you can say when people say, do you have a white Camaro? Say, gosh, if we're lucky. And you go around the corner and you got 14 of them there. Say, whoa, we got really lucky. Truck must have dropped them off this morning. Gosh, the other day the truck dropped them off and I didn't even see any of them. I came on shift and they were all gone. At least we got your pick of white ones out here today. At the bottom of the page, some other fear of loss or impending events. Cars go up, trades go down. It's time to reorder. It's the end of the month, end of the year, end of the day. The manager's in trouble, too many cars. You know how, when we talk about fear of loss, you know how sometimes when you're writing up a sale and you got the keys to the car you've been looking at laying there on the table, you're writing it up, the customer's real nonchalant, they're playing we don't really care, and all of a sudden another salesperson comes in and says, excuse me, are those the keys to that white Camaro? I got a customer looking at it. Can I borrow them real quick? How often have you seen Betty or Bob grab up the keys and say, not so fast, we're buying this car? Fear of loss. It's kind of like the kid sitting on the curb with a ball sitting next to him, got nothing to do, he's bored, hadn't touched the ball in an hour, could care less about the ball until another kid comes up and wants to take it. And then what does he do? Grabs the ball. Well, that's the same fear of loss. Don't miss out. Page 62. Now, both of these on page 62 are some of those action closes we talked about. Number 5, the assumptive sold line close. Now, I've talked about this a couple times. You pull back on the lot, you've got some positive buying signals, just test the waters by saying, Bob, pull over in the sold line, we'll go ahead and pull the keys, nobody else can drive a new car. If he pulls in the sold line, he agreed to buy it. Now, some of you guys just said, well, I don't have a sold line. Well, call that empty spot over there when you're pulling back in the sold line. Say, Bob, pull in the sold line. Well, where is it? It's that empty spot right over there. If he doesn't want it, nothing bad happens. He says, I don't want this car. So nothing bad happens. If it's parked, it's great. If it isn't, you haven't lost anything. If he says, no, I don't think we want this. Well, Bob, if you don't mind me asking, if there's one reason you're hesitating, what's that? So, well, we're not sure it's the color we like. So other than the color, though, everything else is right about the car. Now we start isolating. And this close also requires a second close just to confirm it. If he parks in the sold line, he's probably made the mental decision to get it, but he might have just not known where else to park it. So you need to confirm that. If he parks in the sold line, then you need to ask, Bob, now how are we going to register this? And your name and the company name. If he says, well, you know, my name, but it's going to depend on price. We'll talk about how to close on that. If he says, put it in my name, he agreed to buy. Great for our records. What's the correct spelling of your last name? Get another commitment and another commitment. Bob, do me a favor. Grab the pink slip out of your glove box. Get another commitment. 6 is the decision version of the sold line close. And I really wouldn't use this one very often. I'd just rather use the assumptive version. The decision version is same situation. You're pulling back on the lot, and you say, Bob, if this is the car you want, park it in the sold line. If it isn't, park it back out on the lot, and we'll find a car that you do like. I'd rather just use the assumptive close personally, but if you're uncomfortable with that, go ahead and ask them the decision version. Page 63 is the sharp angle close. Now, we've talked about this before. This is one of the few times you probably won't make an assumptive statement, either or questions. This is the time that it's okay to ask a yes or no question. We use a sharp angle close when we get a conditional buying question. A conditional buying question is, Joe, I like the car, but I don't have a place to park it. Can I buy the car today and you guys keep it till Thursday? Under these conditions, can I get the car? That's their question. It's okay when you get a conditional buying question to flip it back around and say, well, gee, I don't know. If we can, are you ready to take it? There's about the only time you'll want to use a yes or no question. Now, you don't answer every question again with a question, but when you get this conditional buying question, we miss opportunities to close the sale because we just answer. We just say, oh, sure, no problem, we'll keep it till Thursday. They'll say things like, I don't have all my down payment with me today. We've only got a few $100, $600 or $700. Could we give you the $700 now and bring you another $300 in on Friday? Too often we say, oh, sure, no problem. You always want to create some doubt. Anytime you use this conditional buying question in the sharp angle close, don't just say, well, if we could, would you? Always create doubt. Make them feel like it's going to be special if you do this for them. Can I give you 7 today and bring another 300 on Friday? Gosh, you know, my manager doesn't normally let us do this. Let me ask you a question. If I could get him to go along with it, can we go ahead and wrap this up and send you home in it now? Well, sure, if you can do that, I'll take it. So when you use a sharp angle close, you use it with a conditional buying question, and you always create a little bit of doubt before you ask the closing question. Page 64. Now, some of these closes I hate to put in here. This is a price close. The reason I hate to put price closing in here are things that revert to price closing is because that's all you and I were taught to do. We've only been taught price closes. We haven't been taught very many other closing techniques. Now, when I talk about this price close, number 8, I mean without talking dollars. You might want to underline that or highlight that. We're going to use price as a closing question, but without talking dollars. You try to close the sale, you say, Bob, sounds like found a perfect car. And he says, how do you want to register in your name or Betty's name? And he says, well, you know, Joe, we like the car, but it's going to depend on payments. Now we have an objection. Payments is the objection here. We can close on that. So, Bob, if the payments are okay, then can we go ahead and wrap it up and send you home in it? Well, sure, I guess if the payments are all right. Or I like the car, but it's going to depend on what I get for my trade. Bob, it always does, assuming you get what you want for your trade, pretty close to it. Can we go ahead and wrap this up and send you home in it? Joe, I like the car, but, you know, we got a good interest rate down the street. If you guys can beat the rate, I'll get it. So other than the rate, is there any other reason we couldn't send you home in it? No, and as long as the rate's okay, you ready to take it? Absolutely. Great, come on inside and let's take care of the paperwork. Your name or her name. We use all of these as an opportunity to close. I like the car, but I'm not paying $17,300. Bob, sounds to me like you're on a budget and just want to feel comfortable about your purchase. Yeah, but that's a lot more money and they'll charge me for it down the street. Let me ask you, Bob, if we got together on the money and you were comfortable with it and you felt okay with it and it fit your budget, would there be any other reason we couldn't send you home in it? No, if you guys make me a deal, I'll take it. Great, come on inside and let's take care of the paperwork. Now we've used money, the concept, the dollars, the trade values as our close, but we didn't talk about how much money or how high the payments or low they were going to be or what we were going to give them for their trade. Most of us use that same thing, but we start throwing out dollar figures. He gives us the objection, I like the car, but if I don't get enough of my trade, I'm not buying it. Most of us go to the question, what do you want for your trade? Now remember, he's got the lowest figure you can imagine, this next figure, this one, and he'd like to get this one. You just started the negotiation. He's going to give you the highest figure that comes off the top of his head. We don't want to do that. Let's close on the concept, not on the dollar value of the trade. I like the car, but it's going to depend on payments. Don't say what payments were you looking for. Say, well, assuming the payments fit your budget, would there be any other reason we couldn't send you home in it? No, if payments fit, I'd take it. Great, come on inside, cup of coffee or something cold to drink while we take care of the paperwork. Close on the concept, not on the dollars. Page 65, another price close, or another price type close. This is called the incentive close, number 9. Number 9 is the incentive close. Now, any of these price closes, anything that you close on that resembles price leads you to a potential to start grinding out a deal out here, and we want to avoid that as much as we can. Remember that 16% of the people pay sticker price plus. We want to go in there assuming that everybody's going to pay sticker. We don't want to talk about discounts on the lot. We don't want to talk about prices on the lot. And this incentive or inducement closes is one of the closes you use at a very last resort. This is not the close of choice. This is one we'd use maybe 10%, 15% of the time. An example when you'd use it. You're out on the lot, you've asked some closing questions, you've handled some objections, you still just don't get much of a commitment. Guy's looking at a pickup truck, going to use it for his pool supply business. He does pools in the afternoons. You can't quite get anything going. You haven't talked about price. You haven't talked about payments. You haven't talked about trade values. And you want to get a commitment. You might use an incentive close. Bob, let me ask you a question. Now, also fill this with doubt. I don't think my manager would do this, but if I could get him to throw in a bed liner, could we go ahead and wrap this thing up? The reason I say this is not the close you want to use, when you say, if I can get him to throw in a bed liner, you're very likely to get, well, if he'll throw in air conditioning, a bed liner, a CD player, and no special tires and wheels, I'll take it. You opened up the negotiation as soon as you use this close. So this is not the close of choice. This is one of the last resort closes, when you can't do anything else. And you want to keep the incentive as small as you can. You'd rather use a tank of gas or a set of floor mats as an incentive. Bob, sounds like you guys are just right there on the verge. Let me ask you a question. If I get my manager to throw in a set of floor mats, maybe a tank of gas, could we go ahead and wrap this up? And I don't know if you've ever used the tank of gas or floor mats close, but that's worth thousands of dollars. And too many of us start discounting. So, Bob, if I can save you $1,000, why not try floor mats and a tank of gas? If they look at you funny and say, are you guys crazy? You took $3,000 off these things last week. I saw an ad. Bob, what can I tell you? You're a week late. And then go on. And you can kid around with people like that as long as you built rapport. Those first steps of selling are critical because they allow you to do things in the negotiation. They allow you to kid around, they allow you to close, they allow you to not apply pressure but to be more persistent. They let you be a little more assertive, still not aggressive, but you can be assertive. If you've built rapport, if you've investigated, if you've asked questions, if the customer likes you, knows you, and trusts you. And we need to use as much of that as we can. Page 66, the last one in this section, and this is the worst of the worst. This is the close that most of us were taught. This is the only one most of us use. This is a price close, a flat-out price close. Well, if it's so bad, why would I include it with these other two that are not very good? If a close works 10% of the time, it's a shame not to know it because that means we would lose sales 10% of the time. If this close works 5% of the time, and you'd like to keep this in the 5% or less of the times that you use it, this is kind of like what you're using now when you say, let's go inside, fiddle with figures, see what we can do, when you don't have a commitment. This price close, we're going to go in and pencil out a deal. We're going to tell them the should-bes. We're never going to discount the price. We're never going to come down on their, or go up on their trade. We're never going to come down on payments. We're never going to change anything, but we're going to give them the should-bes. And just really quick through a write-up here, so that you understand. I can't get anything going with Bob out here on the lot. Say, Bob, you want to come inside and look at some figures. If I can't do anything else, last choice, this one's terrible. It's going to cost you sales, it's going to cost you gross. But it's better than losing the customer. And you say, Bob, you want to go inside and see what the figures look like? And he says, sure. You go inside and you go through a regular write-up. And I don't know how you guys go through it, probably the same way. You sit down and you say, Bob, this little car you're looking at, $17,383. Now you fill in the tops, you list the options like you would on a regular write-up. But you go through it and you say, Bob, this little car is $17,383 and 27 cents. Now, did you want to add anything to it or take it as is? And he said, well, I'm not adding anything, but I'm not paying $17,300 for this thing. Whoa. And what were you thinking? Well, I wouldn't pay you a penny over 16. Now, you'd want to question these. You'd spend some time talking about these. 16, and you might write it or you might not write it. I'll write it just so that we can see what we're talking about. 16,000. And one of the reasons you might not want to write it, a lot of people feel that it validates the offer when you write it down. If we don't write it down, it's not stuck on paper somewhere. And I don't disagree with that. I'll write it down with some people and some I won't. I'm not paying $17,300, I'd give you 16. Whoa, what did you base that on? How did you arrive at that figure? Well, I saw one advertised down the street for that. Now, when I hear I saw it advertised down the street, I have a script that just comes out. I saw it advertised down the street. Bob, you understand advertising, don't you? And I'm not saying that, and you pause just long enough to create the doubt about advertising. You understand advertising, don't you? Creates doubt. So you understand advertising, don't you? Now, Bob, I'm not saying they don't have a car down there for $16,000, but most people don't realize when we put a car in the paper, and now and then we'll do the same kind of thing, but it's generally a unit that's been in stock too long. Sometimes it's one that's just a real bad color that nobody wants, and a lot of times there has some minor lot damage. And I don't know the reasons that they have it advertised, but it's very likely one of those. And then he may, a lot of times people will bump themselves as you tell stories. And he may say, well, I'm not, all right, I may give you a little more, but I'm going over 16.5. He says, well, okay, gosh, that still sounds pretty low. This is our most popular model, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but we don't normally discount these. You know, we hardly ever get any. Now you refer back to all those statements you made on the lot. Then I go immediately to the trade. And Bob, let's see, you had an 89 Firebird, and we took one in like that last week. I just got a glance at yours. Could have been a little nicer, could have been not as nice. We took one in like that last week for somewhere around $1,500. Is that about what you guys had in mind? I said, what, are you crazy? I called the bank and they said this thing's worth $3,500. Whoa. And then you question that. You don't say, you got to quit saying dumb stuff. Is the banker going to buy it? What you do is chip away at the objection. You don't say the banker's an idiot or bankers don't buy cars. You say, whoa, $3,500, that sounds like a lot. Did he go out and drive the car? No, he didn't actually drive it, but I told him, and he looked it all up, and that's what he said it was worth, and you start chipping away at that objection. You know, when we were looking at it a while ago, I mean, the car's in pretty good shape, but there is that little ding in the right rear quarter panel. The right rear tire is missing tread. Well, no, I got a spare. I understand that, but they're going to have to replace one of the tires. And there's that little hole in the seat, and it's really a pretty nice car. We're going to have to buff it up a little bit, pull the paint back out. Did he subtract for those little things? No, he didn't subtract for those things, but it's a nice car. Do you also know if he was using the most current book? Because, you know, a lot of those guys get their books from us when we're done with them. Instead of paying for them, they wait till we throw them away. And they're generally only 60, 90 days behind, but sometimes that's all it takes for a major change in the book. Well, I don't know what one he had, but that's what he, you know, I might take $2,800 for it, but that's all I'm going down. Gosh, Bob, and again, you may want to write it, you may not, whatever your manager wants you to do. And then you go down to down payment. You say, Bob, in a case like this, the bank normally likes to see about 30% down, and in this case, looks like we're talking around $5,000 to $6,000. Is that about what you were planning on putting down? What, are you crazy? I'm not putting $6,000 down. I'll give you my car and maybe $500. And up to what? I mean, if we needed it. Well, you know, I might come up with $700 or $800, something like that, but I'm not going any over that. Okay, Bob, let me see, just some real basic figuring. Looks like with your car, $800 down, your payments will run you somewhere around $550, $575. Is that about what you had in mind? What are you, crazy? I'm not paying but $300. That's all we can afford. Now, this is all we do. We don't make any commitments. I never came down here. I never went up here. I never came down here. All I did was tell him the should-bes. It should be this, should be this, should be this, should be this. He's told me what he wants to do. Now I get a commitment by going back over the things that he wants to do. And again, this is the worst close. This is what you guys normally use, so you should be pretty good at it. It's the worst one, though, and now to get the commitment, I'll go back through this and say, Bob, you know, all this sounds crazy to me. I've never seen them make so many changes or drop the price or give people that much for a trade or get in with that little down. But let me ask you a question. If we could do this with your car, $800, and keep your payments in that $300 range, can we go ahead and wrap this up? Would there be any other reason you wouldn't want to take it? Now you can probably get a commitment, but remember, you're getting a commitment just on price. This is not the best way to get a commitment. I would rather have the commitment before we sit down and do this. So if he says, yeah, I'll take it. Well, let me get some basic information here. This is about the only time I would do my write-up before my credit app. I would always do my credit app first so that I have this extra information. So he says, and however your manager wants you to do it, you put a check mark there and say, well, Bob, let me have your approval on the check mark and we'll see what we can do. And you get the credit information, you get the check from him, you get the keys, the pink, the reg, take your keys off and you go inside and you now work a deal. If he says, no, I'm not doing that, can you guys meet this? Gosh, I don't know. You know, I used to be able to go in and ask my manager these kind of questions, but they realized that everybody off the street would wonder what our best deal was. They'd spend hours out appraising trades, and you know, just for normal trade appraisals, they charge $100. A lot of banks and insurance companies send them down here to do that, and they'd be happy to do it. But you know what? It sounds to me like you're looking for a good deal, am I right? And now let's rephrase it. Let's do something to close. And he says, yeah. I just don't want to pay that much for a car. Well, Bob, let me ask you a question. Isn't a good deal a car you like at a price you can afford from people that will take care of you after the sale as well? Yes. And tell me, how much, since we all pay the same for these, how much less down the street do you figure it'd be than our best deal, whatever that is? Well, I don't know. I might save a couple $100. And then you just go on and close, whatever you're going to use. Bob, you might use the extended terms clause here, reduction to the ridiculous. Bob, you said you're going to keep the car for 4 years. When you say you might save $200 down the street, what you're talking about is saving $50 a year. You're talking about saving maybe $2 a month to buy the car down there. Have you ever spent a day in service because you couldn't get a ride home or because there's nobody there to help you? Did that cost you more than that $2? You know, you can buy a car cheap somewhere. You can get it where they're going to take care of you. And I wouldn't suggest that we have the lowest price in town, but we got the best service in town. And isn't your decision to purchase going to be based on those other things? And close again. Take it step by step. This is not the close of choice. This is the last one you'd want to use. Now, there's a lot of methods that we can use. The best is the assumptive close. Back to that one. Probably the next best is the summary close. There's a lot of closes. Now, what we've done is ask for the order. Now, when you ask for the order, all we've done is bill value. Now we ask for the order. We tried to close the sale. Now, very often when you try to close, you're going to get objections, like we got objections on this one, like you'll get an objections on an assumptive close. Sounds like found a perfect car. How do you want it registered? Your name or her name? Whoa, Joe, I think we're going to think it over. Now we have an objection. What we have to learn to do next is find the real objection. We got to find out what they mean when they say, I'll think it over, because I'll think it over is not the real objection. I'll think it over, I want to check with a friend, or it's too much money, I'm going to shop the price. Those are the common objections that we get, but those are not the real objections. So we close, we get an objection, the next thing we have to do is find the real objection. And then we have to close again. So when we come back on the next section, we'll talk about how to find that real objection. You guys review these, talk about them. Why don't you pick your 2 favorite closes of everything we talked about? That's going to be part of your homework anyway. So pick a couple closes, talk about these, and I'll see you on the next tape.
This concludes this segment of your training program. As Joe says, the key to your success in learning to close more sales and hold gross is to practice, drill, and rehearse the techniques he's giving you in this training series. And don't forget, be sure to complete the homework assignment for this tape before you go on to the next tape. Good luck on the quiz, too, and we'll see you in the next tape.